We've always perceived ourselves as people of freedom. Freedom of equality, of human decency, of the right to live without fear. These freedoms have been given to us by many who sacrificed greatly. And somehow we've believed that the war has been won, that we have arrived. But if we open our eyes, we can see that the dream has not yet been fully realized, that there are still battles to fight, still inequalities present, still souls suffering, that our faith demands more than awareness, and that no generation is exempt from these battles. But we are held responsible to stand, to do justly, to love mercy, and to serve the least of these.
Good morning, Caney Springs. Good morning. I'll read you another quote. Martin Luther King. I refuse to accept the view that mankind is so tragically bound to the starless midnight of racism and war that bright daylight of peace and brotherhood can never become a reality. And this is what he thinks is the answer. I believe that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word. I believe that we are the bearers of that unconditional love and the bearers of that truth. That we as believers, that's what it is our job. And I'm sure you've heard this quote, maybe one of the most famous Martin Luther King quotes, and I'll probably butcher it, but you know, all that for evil to exist, good men just need to do nothing. And so as we go through this world and as we see inequalities and we see people in need, I think it's our job to step up, don't you think? So my prayer is that we would be aware of those opportunities, that we'd be able to have our eyes open to those, and that we'd be able to see what's going on and around us. Would you mind just take us a moment, let's bow our head and pray. Lord God, I pray that you would help us to make a difference in this place. There would be people that are aware of the oppressed, the people that are in need, the people that need you. And God, that you would help us to figure out how to make a difference. Big ways and small. In your name we pray. Amen. Okay, quick question as we begin. Who's into New Year's resolutions? Raise your hand. Anybody? Anybody? Okay. All right, that's kind of what I thought. Actually, you're lower than the average percentage. You know the average percentage of Americans that make New Year's resolution is 44%. I want to say there were 5 people that raised their hand. Okay, who's not into New Year's resolutions? Okay, totally. Yeah, you guys, you're fine, right? You're all good. You don't need it. What would you need to resolve anything for, right? You're all put together, right? That's why, I'm sure. Okay, so next question. I looked at a Marist report, Marist poll, and they figured out what people resolve to do when they make a New Year's resolution. All right, and you got to get the first 3. In fact, if you don't get the first one, I'm kicking you out of church. Okay, what's the number 1 thing people resolve to do? That's right, lose weight. Lose weight. Who said exercise? You're right, but only you're in second. Second is exercise. Anybody know what number 3 is? Okay, this is what it says is, I resolve to be a better person. Nothing like a real specific goal. I don't think there's an app for that. Okay, last question about resolutions. Let's say we have 100 people that set resolutions. Out of the 100, how many actually reach their resolutions? Out of 100, what would you say the number is? 1. You say 1, there's an optimist right there. The actual number is 8, but 4 of them are lying. So let's say 4. Now, I don't believe, especially in this room, that you are New Year's resolution people. But I am guessing that you're resolution people. That there's a time in your life, and maybe it's not a new year, but where you say to yourself, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I resolve to do with my life. And this year, I'm going to work out more. This year, I'm going to lose some weight. This year, I'm going to get into a size 3. That's my goal. This year, I want to focus more on my work. I want to raise the level of my work. Or I want to get a new job. This is the year that I'm going to do that. I want to stop drinking. I want to stop smoking. I want to worry less. I want to eat healthier. I believe that this room is filled with people that resolve to do something different, resolve to be somebody better than they are today. And yet, how many times when you resolve that, do you end up outside the 8% that actually reach their goal? Now look, I totally get it. Totally get it. A couple years ago, I resolved. This was my resolution. I want to get huge, all right? I want to lift weights, I want to get huge. And so what I did was I went on Craigslist and I found this universal weight set that I could put in my garage. Now, we don't even need to talk about whether or not I reached that goal, do we? I mean, these long sleeves are not hiding the gun show, are they? You know, I worked out and started out really strong, but boy, I'm telling you, 3 or 4 months into it, you know what that weight set was great for? After I washed the car, drying towels is perfect for that. And I'm actually a little disappointed in you guys. It probably would be huge if at least one of you would have given me some encouragement. But nobody, to this day, has ever said, Jack, you're enormous. You know, you look swole, Jack. You're really swole. The closest I got was my wife. And I was working out, and she says, you know what? And these are her exact words. Can you believe this? Jack, you know, you don't look as emaciated as you did. Thank you. So encouraging. So after about 1.5 years of that thing drying towels in my garage, I put it up on Craigslist and somebody else dragged it. And I can guarantee you, I know exactly where it is. It's in somebody's garage drying towels right now. Probably the biggest workout I got was lifting it back onto the truck. Now, why is it that when we resolve, we so often get to that place? This is what I want to be. This is what I want to do. How do we get there? I think I know why. And it's not the reasons why you think. You know, because most of the time we think, well, I wasn't disciplined enough. I just didn't work hard on it. Or my schedule got so busy and I was so racing around that I just lost track of it. Or I got so stressed out with what's going on in my life that I kind of gave in to some of those old vices. Or, you know, they built a donut shop near my office. What was I supposed to do? Those are the excuses we give, but I don't think they're at the center of why we don't hit our resolutions. And here's what I think it is. Because you and I do not resolve big enough. We don't resolve large enough. We don't resolve to do the things that we were designed to do and that bring us the greatest purpose. In fact, when we resolve, most of our resolutions sound something like this. This year, I resolve to be more self-absorbed than I was last year. Because think about it, that's what all of our resolutions are. On this Marist poll, out of the 20 things that they listed, how many had to do with other people? You want to guess? 2. And 3% of people says, I'll spend more time with my family. And 1% of people said, I will help other people this year. 2 of them. Now there was 4% said, I'll spend more time with God. But I know you guys, a lot of the time, our spending time with God is, God, would you answer this prayer for me? And would you help me in this area? Would you get me a better job? Even that becomes me-focused. So our list is, you know, get healthier, worry less, travel, enjoy life, use time better, go back to school, get a new house. It's my bucket list. It's my health. It's my eating habits. It's all about me. And I got to tell you something. You and I were not designed to find purpose by filling ourselves up. And that's why our resolutions fail. I want to challenge you today to resolve bigger. So here's what we're going to do. Why don't you take a moment? We're going to take a second to pray. And I want you to just take 20 seconds and say, God, would you speak to me today in this? We only have a few minutes here. You're not going anywhere. Football games don't start till 12. So you're here. So bow your heads and just take a moment and say, God, would you speak to me? And if you're a believer, or you know God, then make it real specific. But if you don't, and you're just showing up, you're not even sure you believe in all this church stuff, maybe just say, God, wow, it would be great if you gave me perspective on how to resolve bigger. I would love it if you spoke to me into my life. Just take about 30 seconds and pray. Dear God, I pray that you'd speak to us. That you'd help us to resolve better, that you'd help us to do what it is that you've called us to do and find that peace and purpose that we're so looking for. In your name we pray. Amen. All right, here's where we're going to start. We're going to start with Jesus because it begins and ends with Jesus. You shut up at church. Okay, we're going to talk about Jesus. Let me show you right here. This is Matthew chapter 20. All right? And Jesus starts out like this. Whoever wants to become great among you. Now this is where Jesus starts. Who wants to be great? Not just good, not just, passable, but who wants to be great? And this is a good place for us to start as Americans because we're obsessed with who's number one. There's any number of magazines about who's number one and who's the greatest and who's the best and who's the richest. We do this all the time. In fact, we're going to do this right now. We're going to have some fun. It'll take just a minute. And I want you to tell me these three. Okay, write these down. You tell me, and I'll tell you if you're right in a second. Who's the greatest actor of all time? Who's the greatest band of all time? And lastly, in honor of today's football games, who is the greatest football player of all time? Okay, just write it down. I'll give you about 10 seconds. Ready? Go. Let's see how you do. All right. Oh, you're just thinking about it in your head. You guys even playing along. Okay, here we go. First up, let me see what you think. Greatest actor of all time. Anybody? Meryl Streep. I believe she's an actress. I think she's a girl, right? But you're right. Greatest actress of all time. How about male? Anybody?
Laurence Olivier.
Laurence Olivier. That's going in the Wayback Machine, but I hear he was pretty good. He's got a great name for sure. Anybody else? John Wayne. There we go. Great actor. Greatest actor of all time is Daniel Day-Lewis because Daniel Day-Lewis has won 3 Academy Awards for Best Actor and no other actor has ever done that, right? Okay, secondly, greatest band of all time. Man, that is so great because first service and second service both said the same thing. The Beatles, the number 1 of all time. Over this last holiday season, I listened to the Paul McCartney story. And actually, I had my daughter listen to part of it too. I said, I was never into the Beatles, so now I'm a total Beatle maniac. And I love them all, John, Paul, and Ringo especially. Totally in. Number 1 commercial band of all time, most commercially successful band of all time, and there's no question, it's the Beatles. Okay, lastly, greatest football player of all time. I'm sure there's some controversy here. Anybody? We get Joe Namath. Just maybe the best looking. Bart Starr. Wow, that's really going back. Anybody else? Joe Montana? Yeah, you're almost there. Jerry Rice. Jerry Rice, best football player of all time. Now, this is funny. I don't know. Did you watch this? I watched A Football Life on the NFL Network about Jerry Rice, and he was interviewed, and this is how the interview starts. The whole thing starts with Jerry saying this. He says, I could say that I'm the greatest football player of all time, based on my statistics. But I'm just not that kind of guy. Yeah, you're a lot more humble than that, aren't you, Jerry? Okay, now how many got one of those 3? Any of you get one of those three? Okay, anybody get two? Two? Okay, you're probably wondering my source, right? You want to know what my source is? It's me, it's what I think. So if you agree with me, you're right. If you disagree with me, you're wrong. As Americans, being the greatest, it's all about being the greatest. And Jesus says, look, do you want to be great? Do you want to be a great husband? Do you want to be a great wife? Do you want to be a great parent? Do you want to be a great co-worker? Who wants to be great? Whoever wants to be great among you must be your servant. Now, isn't that interesting? Because all the people that we just listed are pretty much the opposite of that. And whoever wants to be first must be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve. To be great starts here. And it's not about you. Now, admittedly, serving other people will not give you a six-pack or lower your half-marathon time. But herein is where we find our purpose. Now, let's explore this a little bit. I want you to open your Bible to Luke chapter 4. Here's where we're going to spend the rest of our day. Luke chapter 4, verse 14. And here's where we're at. Jesus is just starting his ministry. In fact, he just got out of the desert where he was tempted, and now it begins. And Jesus hits it big time. You look at Luke chapter 4, verse 14. If you don't have a Bible, we have them in the back. You can grab one anytime. In fact, you can grab one on your way out. If you don't even have one, take it. That's our gift to you. But bring one so that you can underline it and highlight it and you're ready to go. Okay? Luke chapter 4, verse 14 says this. Jesus returned to Galilee in the power of the Spirit, and news about him spread through the whole countryside. He was teaching in the synagogue, and everyone praised him. He started in Galilee, and he is all the rage. He's bigger than the Beatles and Bieber put together. He's, the whole country's tweeting about him. Everybody's all in. And then he changes venue. 16, he went to Nazareth, where he'd been brought up. This is Jesus' part of town. And everybody knew him, and that's the junior high he went to, and there's the Denny's he used to go to, and here's the guy. We all know this guy. And on the Sabbath day, he went into the synagogue, as was his custom. He stood up to read, and the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was handed to him, and unrolling it, he found the place where it is written. Now, this is Jesus' very first sermon ever recorded. It's only about 3 minutes long, so you'll love it. And Jesus is asked, what's your purpose? What are you doing here? He's going to lay it out right now. The Spirit of the Lord is on me, because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners, recovery of sight for the blind, to set the oppressed free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. Now, this passage is originally in the book of Isaiah, and it was written about the captives, people who were captive, who were coming back into Israel, and all the celebration that they would have. But here's another thing that it is. It's also a prophecy about the Messiah. So when Jesus reads it, he's saying, look, I'm here. I'm the Messiah. Here's why I came. And he gives us 4 reasons, 4 purposes. The first one says, proclaim good news to the poor. Now, here's the interesting thing about the poor. The way that they viewed the poor in those days is, you know what, the reason why poor people were poor? Because God had removed his blessing from them. That's what they thought. So if you were poor, not only did you not have money, but you didn't have prestige, and you couldn't, in church, you sat in the back row because people knew that God had removed their blessing. That's what they thought about poor people back then. Secondly, he was sent to proclaim freedom for prisoners. Now, there's a figurative way of looking at this passage that if you are figuratively in prison, then God will reach out to you. But you know what? There's a very literal feeling to these two, because these are the people that Jesus cared about. Prisoners, abusers, thieves, murderers. Those are the people Jesus came for. Next one, he came to bring sight to the blind. Now, here's what I think is crazy, is that if you were a blind person, that they felt the same way about you as the poor people. That the reason why you're blind, there must be a reason why, and it's because God either doesn't like you or your family or somebody messed up. Look at John chapter 9. I'll just read it for you. It says, as Jesus went along, he saw a man blind from birth, and his disciples said this, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Can you imagine seeing a blind person and thinking that? But you know what? In some ways, we kind of get this. Because when we go through a difficult time, it's easy for us to get to this place where we go, what did I do wrong, God? What did I do to deserve this? Was it me, my parents? Who messed up? Have you ever been in that spot? Have you ever wondered what Jesus would say to you in that spot? I can show you exactly what he would say. Verse 3 says, neither this man nor his parents sinned, said Jesus. But this happened so the works of God might be displayed in him. Been around a long time. The times when Jesus shows up the greatest is in your darkness. And I don't know what you're going through right now. And for a lot of you, I wish I could take it away, but I can tell you, you invite Jesus in, and he can do things that you would never even imagine. Okay, one last group of people, he says, I came to set the oppressed free. That line, to set the oppressed free, means to break or shatter into pieces your oppression. So whatever it is, that history that you have with your parents that you can't get over, God wants to shatter that, or that broken relationship. He wants to shatter the pain that's in your life, or that all that history that you have and those regrets. He wants to come into your life, and he wants to shatter that. All right, I just gave you 4 purposes for Jesus coming. Let me ask you this question. Which one of those is self-absorbed? Which one of those is me-focused? None of them. Let me ask you, what are you going to resolve this year? What are you going to resolve to do this year? Is it going to be about my comfort and my job and my clothes, and I'm going to redecorate my living room, I'm going to make sure my backyard looks great, my bucket list, my travel plans? Or are you going to resolve to something bigger? Because I tell you, the only way that you will ever feel that purpose is if you resolve to make a difference in the life of somebody else, to join God in his work. Resolve to help somebody at your office. Resolve to find somebody in your neighborhood who is in need and pour into their life. Resolve to help a child. Resolve to foster somebody. Resolve to make a difference. To serve. That's where we find our purpose. Now, let me share with you a couple things that will happen to you if you resolve to do this. And the first is this. We keep reading our story, we're going to find, if you resolve to help people, it'll get messy. You know that though, right? Whenever you get involved with people, it gets messy. And your life gets confusing, and it doesn't always go the way you want. I know you've probably heard my philosophy of leadership, right? It goes like this. If you resolve to help somebody out and make a difference in their life, somebody somewhere thinks you're doing it wrong. Do you agree with that? Somebody thinks you're doing it wrong. Somebody thinks you need to do it better this way. Somebody thinks that, somebody's going to get their feelings hurt. That somebody's not going to thank you enough. It's just the way it is when you help people. I remember one time I was walking out of, let's see, it was Daphne's in Mira Mesa. You know where that is? You know where Jamba Juice is, and there's a Starbucks right there, and there's Pickup Sticks. And as I was walked out, I saw a homeless guy there. Now, I've resolved in my heart not to feed homeless people. I mean, no, that's terrible. Not to give them money. No, I just buy them alcohol. I just give them alcohol. Go ahead, knock yourself out. No middleman. Here's some Jack Daniels, go for it. So I won't give him money, but I'll feed him. So I was walking up, this guy was clearly homeless. So I said to him, hey man, can I buy you a meal? He says, oh, that'd be great. And I said, well, how about Daphne's? I'm just going to Daphne's and buy you a meal. He goes, I had Daphne's yesterday. She said, oh, okay. He's a person, right? You can choose. Well, we got Pickup Sticks right down there at the end, and it literally says, you know what, I'm not really into Chinese. So I think we settled on Rubio's, 2 fish tacos, no onions, a Coke light ice. Okay, I think that's where we ended up. And somehow, it just didn't feel the way I wanted it to feel in that moment. Why is that? Look, I can promise you, it's just messy. Verse 20 says this. Jesus finished reading, then he rolled up the scroll and he gave it back to the attendant and he sat down, and the eyes of everyone in the synagogue were fastened on him. And he began to say to them, "Today the scripture is fulfilled in your hearing." You are witnessing the Savior, the Messiah, right here. And at first the reaction was good. Verse 22, all spoke well of him. They were amazed at the gracious words that came from his lips. And then someone pipes up with this. Isn't this Joseph's son? And then people start talking. Oh yeah, he just lived down the street. This guy's nobody. We remember him when he was a little kid. Then they start talking about him, and Jesus realizes what's going on, and he says to them, in essence, in the next couple verses, says, look, I'm not going to be able to do any miracles for you guys because you don't believe. You don't have that kind of faith. And they're expecting some big miracle show, and Jesus says, I'm not going to be able to do that here because you don't believe in me. And look at where it goes. Verse 28. All the people in the synagogue were furious when they heard this. They got up, they drove him out of the town, and they took him to the brow of the hill on which the town was built in order to throw him off the cliff. He stands up and says, this is what I resolved to do. Those poor people, we're going to help them. Those blind people, we're going to reach them. Those prisoners, we're going to break them free. All those people who are oppressed, follow me, and I'll shatter that oppression from you. This is what he says, and this is where he ends up. At the top of a cliff, about ready to be thrown off the top. But he walked right through the crowd, and he went on his way. I am telling you, if you want to help people, it will be messy. Now, you're probably thinking, so then why would I do it? You know, I'll just work on my abs. You know, I'll just recommit to MetaFast. That sounds better. Look, you will never find the purpose that you were built for unless you learn how to do this, unless you learn how to make it not about you, unless you focus on other people. But it will get messy. Secondly, if you resolve to help people, it will most likely be on your way to what you think is important. You know, I think what these people expected was this big miracle service and get everybody together, we'll all be in the synagogue and all the sick people will come in, it'll be cool, it'll be a great show. And Jesus says, I'm not going to do that. Because that's not really the way Jesus did things. You know, they didn't put up banners and say, hey, meet us here at this time and Jesus will heal you. Almost every time Jesus did something like that, he was walking from one place to another place. Mark 1:16. As Jesus walked beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and his brother Andrew casting a net into the lake. So he got his disciples, he's just walking by. Matthew 8:28. When he arrived at the other side in the region of the Gadarenes, 2 demon-possessed men came from tombs to meet him. He's just heading from this place, and 2 demon-possessed guys came out. Mark 10:17. As Jesus started on his way, a man ran up and fell on his knees before him. Good teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life? Again, he's on his way. Luke 8. As Jesus was on his way, the crowds almost crushed him, and a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. So he healed her. Luke 17. And now, on his way to Jerusalem, Jesus traveled along the border between Samaria and Galilee. As he was going, 10 men with leprosy met him. And this is just the way it works. You know, I think when we think of this idea of helping people, sometimes this thought pops into your head. Maybe this isn't you, but it's me. If I'm going to do something, I want it to be big. You know, I want to start a movement. I want to have a ministry. I want to do this whole brand new mission field that's going to be awesome. And I don't think that that's necessarily a selfish feeling. I just think it's a very American way of looking at life. You know, if we're going to do it, we might as well make it huge and great and fancy and awesome. But let me tell you something. The biggest impact you will likely have is not starting a big foundation, but what you do walking from here to there. Walking from here to where you think you're supposed to be. Let me give you a couple examples. Back in June, I was walking my dog, got a new puppy. And anybody ever try to walk a puppy? I mean, you're just, you're not walking the puppy, the puppy's walking you. And so I'm following this puppy around. And I go across, there's a neighbor. Her name's Jo, she's 80 years old. And when I walk up to Jo, she's working in her yard. I can see that she likes looking at this puppy. So I grab the puppy, I pick her up, and I walk over to Jo. And I just let Jo pet her, and Jo is so happy. But as she's standing there, Jo does this, okay? And then she stops. Oh, wow, what is that? And then she does again. And she tells me that it's this, since she had her hip replaced, that she has these sharp pains all the time when she's standing. Mm-hmm. So after a while, she has to go sit on a bucket, and so she goes sits on the bucket, and I put the dog on her lap, and she just pets her, and we talk for a while. And that was it. So fast forward a couple months, but that was June. In July, I had back surgery, and by the end, just about the end of August, I was ready to go back to work. It was 5 weeks, and I decided I'm going to go back to work. I'm going to walk to work my first day, because it's the only thing I can do for exercise, so I'm going to walk to work. And as I walk, I see Jo again. And Jo again, she's working in her yard, and she does this. And we just started talking. Well, apparently, since that hip surgery, she's been in great pain. She used to have a chiropractor that she went to help her with that pain, but the chiropractor said this to her: look, I can't see you anymore because I'm afraid your bones are going to break. Well, in my recovery from my back surgery, and in the history of me being here, living in San Diego, I have had 3 different chiropractors volunteer to treat me for free. That's the perk of being a pastor. You can get cracked anywhere. And I'm thinking to myself, I have 3 people that will treat me for free, and she doesn't have a single person that will care for her. So I called up one of my friends and said, hey, let me tell you about my friend Jo. Will you see her? And I want to make sure that I get the bill for that. So I made the arrangements, and I called Jo and said, hey, Jo, I want to take you to a chiropractor. I think you're really going to like Heidi. So I drove her to see Doc Heidi. And, that day she wasn't healed. But you know what? She definitely was. She was loved. And the gentleness that everybody treated her with. She was loved, and she was honored, and she was valued. And the next week we went back again. You know what? That took me time and effort and money, although I don't think they charged me. It was the greatest thing I did all day. I was so full because I simply stopped along my way. Let me give you another story. So I was on my way to a wedding. I was swinging through McDonald's to get a drink. And as I swung through, there was a guy, and my window rolled down, and he says, hey man, you got any money? I said, no, just alcohol. And so, I said, no, but I'll get you a meal. So I got out, and I got him some kind of, number 3, and brought it out with a Coke. And he was so grateful. Homeless people are so grateful. So I said, hey man, is there anything I can pray for you? His name was Justin. And this was Justin's prayer. And I have to tell you, I have to clean it up for this audience. This is what I said, what can I pray for you about? He says, Jack, just pray that I get my stuff together. I go, well, that's an interesting prayer. I've never prayed that before. But I did there. I put my arm on my shoulder, and I said, God, help Justin get his stuff together. And I used the word. And that was the most fun I ever had during prayer. And he was so grateful for me to be involved. And all I did was stop on my way. Let me give you one more story. This last week, I was talking to a buddy of mine, and this buddy of mine was struggling, having some difficult times, and he was borrowing somebody's car to get to his new job, and the guy who was borrowing his car from took the car back. So now he can't get to his job. 3 days later, I'm talking to a friend, and she says this, yeah, we've got this car, we're trying to get rid of it. I said, well, are you going to sell it on Craigslist? No, it's terrible. We just want to give it to somebody. And so I hooked up my two friends. And when I told this buddy that I had found him a car, you've never seen somebody so happy over such a crappy car. And I did nothing in that case. I just showed up on my way. Like, here's the problem, though. Because the way most of us go through life is like this. Head down. Who texted me? What's my email? If I move the yellow candy over, you will crush those. And the difference you could make if you just resolved to keep your head up, to keep your eyes open for somebody that you can make a difference in their life. What could we do? Let's resolve bigger this year. Let's resolve beyond my waist and my food and my weightlifting. Can you do that? Let's take a second, bow your head. First off, I want to say this. Do you know this Jesus that came to set oppressed people free and prisoners? And you know, he can do the same with you. You know that? He can set you free. Church people can't. Church people can give you a lot of things to be guilty about and judge you. But Jesus can set you free. If you want to know that Jesus, just pray this. Just say, God, would you come into my life? God, thank you for dying on the cross to forgive me of my sins. Wipe out my past. Wipe out my regrets. I give my life to you today. I want to follow you today. If you do that, that begins a brand new life. And we said it's not easy. It's hard, you know. But I'm telling you, there's purpose in that. If you made that decision, we'd love to know about it. Take a little white card out of the caddy and write your name, and we'll get you information that'll help you on that journey. God, I pray for the rest of us that we would resolve to make a difference. That we would resolve to keep our head up, to keep our eyes up for people in need. And God, that you would show us and that you would give us that purpose. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.